The great hall of the Galactic Council was full again. The same white walls glowed with the same soft light. The same thousands of seats rose in circles around the central platform. The same aliens from across the galaxy filled those seats. But something was different this time. Commander Taiho stood on the central platform again. Behind him stood Lieutenant Yuna, Sergeant Day, and Private Hyan. They wore their same simple green uniforms. But now those uniforms had small marks of battle. Dust that could not be completely washed out. Small tears that had been stitched but not replaced. They were marks of respect. They showed that these soldiers had been in a real fight and had come back alive. General Morik of the Velthari stood in his high seat. He looked different too. His face was not so proud. His voice was not so mocking. Next to him sat Captain Ven, who had asked to be present for this meeting. "Commander Taiho," Morik said. His voice echoed through the hall. "We have received the reports from Vorn 4. We have seen the recordings. We have heard the testimony of Captain Ven and the surviving Velthari soldiers." Taiho nodded but said nothing. He waited. Morik continued. "You and your Marines were ambushed by a force that outnumbered you 5-1. You had the low ground. You had no support. By every measure, you should have been destroyed." "Yes," Taiho said simply, "but you were not destroyed." Morik looked at the other council members. Not only did the humans survive, but they also defeated the Kryn forces completely. They killed over 70 enemy soldiers. They suffered only 5 losses. 3 Velthari and 2 human wounded. No human deaths. There were murmurs throughout the hall. The aliens were surprised. They had expected the humans to fail. They had expected to hear about a disaster. Instead, they were hearing about a victory. "How did you do this?" Morik asked. "Your weapons are not better than ours. Your armor is certainly worse. Your soldiers are smaller and weaker than many of the species in this room. How did you survive and win?" Taiho stepped forward. "May I speak freely, General?" Morik nodded. "Speak." Taiho looked around the hall. He looked at every species, every general, every council member. Then he began to talk. "Before this war, you asked me why humans use old tactics. You mocked us for using methods that are 100 years old. You thought we were primitive. You thought we were stuck in the past. You thought we would fail because we did not have your new technologies and new strategies." He paused. The hall was silent. "But you were wrong," Taiho continued. "You were wrong because you did not understand what old tactics really mean. When I say our tactics are 100 years old, I am not saying they are outdated. I am saying they have been tested for 100 years. I am saying that thousands of soldiers have used these tactics and lived because of them. I am saying that the mistakes have been found and fixed. The weaknesses have been discovered and removed. What is left is pure and proven." Lieutenant Yuna stood a little taller. Sergeant Day had a small smile on his face. Private Hyan looked proud for the first time since this whole thing started. "In the valley on Vorn 4, Taiho said, "we used tactics that were taught to soldiers on Earth before humans ever left their planet. We found cover. We held our ground. We conserved our ammunition. We supported each other. We waited for the right moment. And when that moment came, we attacked from multiple directions at once. It is not complicated. It is not new, but it works." A Karathi general clicked his mandibles. "But the Kryn are unlike any enemy you have faced before. How can old tactics work against a new enemy?" Taiho turned to face him. "Because the basics of war do not change. It does not matter if your enemy has scales or fur or metal skin. It does not matter if they use energy weapons or projectile weapons or their bare hands. Every enemy needs to see the fight. Every enemy needs cover to survive. Every enemy needs to move to attack. If you understand these basic truths, you can fight any enemy. He looked back at the whole council. Old does not mean weak. Old does not mean outdated. Old means proven. Old means tested. Old means that generations of soldiers have lived and died to make these tactics work. When you throw away old tactics just because they are old, you throw away all that knowledge, all that sacrifice, all that testing. The hall was completely silent now. Every alien was listening. Every eye was on Tejo. "I'm not saying that new ideas are bad," Tejo said. "New ideas can be good, but they must be tested. They must be proven. And until they are proven, they are just theories. In war, theories get people killed. I would rather use tactics that have kept soldiers alive for 100 years than theories that might work, but probably will not." Captain Venn stood up in his seat. "May I speak, General Morik?" Morik looked surprised, but he nodded. Hn walked down to the central platform. He stood next to Tejo, facing the council. "I was in that valley," Venn said. "I saw what happened. I saw my soldiers die because they did not know how to fight like the humans. They stood in the open. They fired without aiming. They did not use cover. They did not work together. And they died." He looked at Tejo. "But I also saw the humans save us. They taught us to find cover. They taught us to aim before we shoot. They taught us to work as a team instead of as individuals. And because of their old tactics, some of us survived." Venn turned back to the council. "I was wrong about the humans. We were all wrong. Their old tactics are not a weakness. They are a strength. They are the reason why humans have survived so many wars on their own planet. They are the reason why humans will help us survive this war against the Kryn." General Morik was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood up. "Commander Tejo," he said, "on behalf of the Velthari Empire and the Galactic Council, I apologize for doubting you and your soldiers. We were arrogant. We thought that because we have been in space longer, we knew more about war. We were wrong." Tejo bowed his head slightly. "There's no need to apologize, General. We are all learning." Morik nodded. "From this moment forward, human tactics will be studied by all Alliance forces. Your training methods will be shared with every species. And human officers will be given command authority equal to any other Alliance member." There were sounds of agreement from around the hall. The Karathi clicked their mandibles in approval. The Fen growled with respect. Other species made their own sounds of agreement. Te-Ho stood tall on the platform. His soldiers stood behind him, proud and strong. "We are honored to serve," Tejo said, "and we are ready to teach. The Kryn are a powerful enemy, but if we work together, if we share our knowledge, if we learn from each other, we can defeat them." He looked around the hall one more time. "Remember what I said. Old does not mean outdated. Old means it still works. And as long as something works, it is worth using." The hall erupted in sounds of approval and respect. The aliens who had mocked the humans were now cheering for them. The council that had doubted them was now ready to learn from them. Sergeant Day leaned close to Lieutenant Yuna. "That was a good speech." Yuna smiled. "The commander always knows what to say." Private Hyan looked at both of them. "Do you think we really can defeat the Kryn?" Day put his hand on Hyan's shoulder. "We have been fighting for 100 years, young man. We have faced enemies who were stronger, faster, and smarter than us. We survived because we learned and adapted and never gave up. The Kryn are just another enemy, and we will beat them the same way we beat all the others." "How?" Hyan asked. Day smiled his hard smile. "With old tactics. Proven tactics. Tactics that work." On the platform, Commander Tejo was shaking hands with General Morik. For the first time, The Valkyrie general was smiling with real respect. "Your soldiers are impressive, Commander," Morik said. "I look forward to fighting beside them." "And I look forward to teaching your soldiers," Taeho replied. "They have courage. They just need training." Morik nodded. "Then train them well. The Kryn will not wait." Taeho looked out at the hall full of aliens. Thousands of beings from across the galaxy, all united against a common enemy. All ready to learn from the humans. It was a strange feeling. On Earth, humans had fought each other for thousands of years. They had been divided by countries and languages and beliefs. But here, in the cold dark of space, humanity was united. And not just united. Respected because of old tactics, because of tested methods, because of the simple truth that Taeho had spoken. Old means it still works. And as long as something works, it is worth fighting for. The sound of engines came from the east. It was a deep, heavy sound that shook the ground and made the rocks vibrate. Lieutenant Yuna looked up and saw 3 large dropships breaking through the dark clouds. They were ugly machines, painted in dark green and covered in weapons. But to Yuna, they were the most beautiful things she had ever seen. "Support has arrived," Hyan shouted. His voice was full of relief. The dropships flew low over the valley. Their guns opened fire on the Kryn positions on the cliffs. Bright lines of tracer fire cut through the air. Explosions bloomed on the rocks above. Kryn soldiers fell or ran for cover. One of the dropships landed in the middle of the valley. Its doors opened before it even touched the ground, and Marines started jumping out. They moved fast and smooth, spreading out across the valley floor. Commander Taeho was the first one off the ship. He carried a rifle in his hands and wore the same simple green uniform as everyone else. He did not look like a commander. He looked like just another soldier. But when he moved, everyone followed. "Lieutenant Yuna, report," Taeho said as he reached her position. Yuna saluted quickly. "Sir, we were ambushed approximately 40 minutes ago. Approximately 80 to 100 Kryn on the cliffs above us. We have held position with minimal losses. 3 Valkyrie dead. 2 Marines wounded, but still fighting." Taeho nodded. "Good work. Now we take the fight to them." He turned to the Marines who had come with him. There were about 50 of them, fresh and ready for battle. They were already taking positions, finding cover, preparing their weapons. "Listen up," Taeho said. His voice was not loud, but everyone heard him. "The Kryn think they have us trapped. They are wrong. We are going to push up both sides of this valley and clear those cliffs. Standard flanking maneuver. First squad takes the left. Second squad takes the right. Third squad provides covering fire from the center." The Marines nodded. They knew what to do. They had practiced this maneuver hundreds of times. "What about us?" Captain Ven asked. He was standing now, his golden armor dented and dirty. "What should the Valkyrie do?" Taeho looked at him for a moment. Then he said, "Stay with the center group. Provide fire support. Watch for any Kryn trying to retreat." Ven nodded. He did not argue or complain. The fighting had changed him. "Move out," Taeho ordered. The Marines moved. They did not run. They did not charge. They moved in small groups, covering each other, checking every rock and shadow. It was slow and careful, and exactly what they had been trained to do. Sergeant Day led the first squad up the left side of the valley. He climbed over rocks and moved through gaps with the ease of a man who had done this many times before. Behind him came Sumin, Jay, and 8 other Marines. They reached the base of the left cliff. Above them, Kryn soldiers were firing down at the center group. They did not see the Marines climbing up behind them. "Quiet now," they whispered. "When we reach the top, hit them fast and hard. Do not give them time to react." The squad climbed. The rocks were rough and sharp. The wind was cold and strong. But the Marines did not stop. They had climbed worse cliffs in worse weather. Day reached the top first. He pulled himself up and saw a line of Kryn soldiers with their backs to him. They were all focused on the valley below. They did not know death was behind them. Day raised his rifle. "Now," he said. The Marines opened fire. The sound was loud and sudden and terrible. The Kryn had no time to react. They fell one after another, hit from behind by enemies they never saw coming. On the right side of the valley, the second squad was doing the same thing. They had climbed up the right cliff and attacked the Kryn from behind. The enemy soldiers who had been so confident were now trapped between two groups of Marines. In the center of the valley, Tejo led the third squad forward. They kept firing at the cliffs, keeping the Kryn's attention. Every time a Kryn tried to turn and face the flanking squads, a bullet from the center would force them back. It was a classic tactic. It was old. It was simple. And it worked perfectly. The Kryn began to panic. They were not used to this kind of fighting. They were used to overwhelming their enemies with numbers and firepower. They were used to attacking, not defending. They did not know how to handle enemies who fought with discipline and coordination. Some of the Kryn tried to run. They jumped from the cliffs and tried to escape into the rocky land beyond. But the Valkyrie soldiers were waiting. Captain Ven and his two remaining soldiers cut them down with precise energy blasts. Lieutenant Yuna moved up the center of the valley with Tejo. She saw Kryn falling all around her. She saw the Marines working together, covering each other, moving forward step by step. It was not pretty. It was not exciting. But it was effective. "They are breaking," she said to Tejo. "They are running. Keep pushing," Tejo said. "Do not give them time to regroup." The Marines kept pushing. Up the cliffs, through the rocks, into every hiding place where Kryn soldiers might be waiting. They cleared each position one at a time. They did not rush. They did not take chances. Private Hyan was with the center group now. He was still carrying his radio, but he was also carrying a rifle. He fired at a Kryn that was trying to hide behind a rock. His first shot missed. His second shot did not. "Good shot, Hyan," Tejo said. Hyan nodded. He did not smile. He was focused on the job. On the left cliff, Day and his squad had reached the top. The Kryn who had been there were all dead or running. Day stood at the edge and looked down at the valley. He could see the entire battle from up here. The Kryn were finished. Their ambush had failed. Their soldiers were dead or scattered. Their carefully planned attack had been turned into a disaster. And it had been done with tactics that were 100 years old. Day raised his hand and gave a signal. The Marines below saw it and understood. The left cliff was clear. A few minutes later, a similar signal came from the right cliff. The second squad had also finished their job. Te-Ho stopped in the center of the valley. The firing had stopped. The Kryn were gone. Only the Alliance soldiers remained. "All units report," Tejo said into his radio. One by one, the squad leaders reported in. First squad, clear. Second squad, clear. Third squad, clear. Valkyrie unit, clear. It was over. Yuna stood beside Tejo and looked around. The valley was quiet now. The only sounds were the wind and the soft groans of the wounded. "We did it," she said. Tejo nodded. "Yes, we did." Captain Ven walked over to them. His golden armor was covered in dust and blood. His face was tired. But his eyes were different. They were not proud anymore. They were thoughtful. "Commander," Ven said, "I owe you an apology." Tejo looked at him. "For what?" "For doubting you. For doubting your tactics." Ven looked at the cliffs where so many Kryn had died. "You used old methods." Simple methods. But they worked. They worked better than anything we have ever tried. Tahoe shook his head. It is not about old or new. It is about what works. These tactics have been tested in thousands of battles. They work because they are based on simple truths. Cover protects you. Movement keeps the enemy guessing. Fire kills the enemy. Support keeps you alive. These things do not change. Ven nodded slowly. I understand now. I will make sure the council understands too. Tahoe put his hand on Ven's shoulder. We are not enemies, Captain. We are allies. We can learn from each other. Ven looked at the hand on his shoulder. Then he nodded again. Yes, we can. The dropships were landing again to pick up the wounded and the dead. The battle was over, but the war was just beginning. And for the first time, the Alliance was fighting together. The Kryn kept attacking. Wave after wave of dark shapes moved down the cliffs, firing their green energy beams at the trapped Alliance soldiers. The air was thick with smoke and the smell of burning rock. Every few seconds, another beam would hit somewhere close, sending pieces of stone flying through the air. Sergeant Day pressed his back against a rock and reloaded his rifle. His hands moved automatically, doing what they had done 1,000 times before. He did not need to think about it. His body knew what to do. Beside him, Private J was firing at a group of Kryn that was trying to move along the left cliff. Jay was a good shot. He did not waste bullets. Every time he pulled the trigger, a Kryn fell or was forced back into cover. They are not stopping, Jay said. His voice was calm, but Day could hear the worry in it. They will stop when they run out of soldiers, Day said. Keep shooting. On the other side of the small rock formation, Private Su-min was watching a narrow gap between two large boulders. The Kryn had tried to come through that gap twice already. Both times, Su-min had stopped them. She was a small woman, but she was fierce. The Kryn had learned to fear that gap. Captain Ven of the Valkyrie crawled over to where Day was positioned. The Valkyrie captain looked different now. His golden armor was covered in dust and scorch marks. His white eyes were not so proud anymore. He looked like a soldier who had just learned that war was not what he thought it was. How long have you been fighting? Ven asked Day. Day did not stop watching the cliffs. 30 years. 30 years? Ven sounded surprised. You have been a soldier for 30 years? I joined when I was 18. I am 48 now. Day fired 2 shots at a Kryn that was moving between rocks. The first shot made it duck. The second shot hit it in the shoulder. It fell back and did not get up. Ven was quiet for a moment. Then he asked, why do you use those old tactics? The trench fighting, the slow movement, the constant checking of every shadow. Why not use modern methods? Day smiled. It was not a happy smile. You want to know why we use the old ways? Yes. They pointed at the cliffs above them. Look at those Kryn. They have better weapons than us. They have the high ground. They have more soldiers. By all logic, we should be dead already. Ven nodded slowly. Yes, you should be. But we are not dead, they said. We are still here. We are still fighting. And do you know why? Ven shook his head. Because of the old ways. Day reloaded his rifle again. The first thing the old tactics teach you is simple. Stay alive. Do not be brave. Do not be proud. Just stay alive. A dead soldier cannot fight. A dead soldier cannot win. So the first rule is to not die. But how do you win if you are always hiding? Day laughed. It was a short, hard sound. You think we are hiding? We are not hiding. We are waiting. There's a difference. On the other side of their position, Lieutenant Yuna was organizing the defense. She moved from soldier to soldier, checking their ammunition, adjusting their positions, giving them orders. She was calm and focused. She did not waste words. "Hyan, how much time until support arrives?" Private Hyan checked his radio. 15 minutes, Lieutenant." "Good. We can hold for 15 minutes." She looked at the two remaining Valkyrie soldiers. They were still firing, but they were getting better. They were starting to aim instead of just shooting. "You two, save your energy packs. Only fire when you have a clear target." The Valkyrie soldiers nodded. They did not argue anymore. Captain Ven watched this from his position near Day. "Your lieutenant is young, but she commands like someone much older. She learned from the best," Day said. "Commander Taeho trained her himself." "Taeho, the man who spoke at the council." Ven's voice was thoughtful. "He did not seem impressive to me at the time. But now, I am starting to wonder if I was wrong." Day shrugged. "The commander does not try to be impressive. He just tries to be effective." A large group of Kryn suddenly appeared on the right side of the cliff. They were carrying something heavy. It looked like a large weapon, bigger than anything they had used before. "Heavy weapon!" Sumin shouted. "Right side." Yuna reacted immediately. "Everyone, focus on the right. Stop that weapon." All the Marines turned their fire toward the Kryn with the heavy weapon. Bullets flew through the air. 3 Kryn fell. Then 4 more. But the others kept coming. They were determined to set up their weapon. "They are going to destroy our cover," Jay said. "If they fire that thing, we are finished." Day stood up from behind his rock. It was a dangerous thing to do. Energy beams flew past him, close enough that he could feel the heat. But he did not move. He raised his rifle and took aim. 1 shot. The Kryn holding the front of the weapon fell. Another Kryn grabbed the weapon. They fired again. That Kryn fell too. A third Kryn reached for the weapon. Before Day could fire, Yuna shot it from across the position. The heavy weapon fell to the ground. No one was left to carry it. Day dropped back behind his rock. His heart was beating fast, but his hands were steady. "That was foolish," Ven said. "You could have been killed." "Yes," Day agreed. "But if they had set up that weapon, we would all be killed. Sometimes you have to take a risk." Ven was quiet for a long moment. Then he said something that surprised Day. "I was wrong about you humans." Day looked at him. "What do you mean?" "At the council, I thought your tactics were old and useless. I thought you were primitive soldiers who did not understand modern war. But I was wrong." Ven looked at the battlefield around them. At the dead Kryn on the cliffs. At the Marines who were still fighting, still holding, still alive. "Your old tactics are not useless. They are tested. They work because they have worked for 100 years. Day nodded slowly. "Now you understand. Why did you not explain this at the council?" "We tried," Day said. "But you did not want to listen. You thought your new methods were better because they were new. But new does not mean better. New just means untested." Ven looked down at his hands. His forearms were shaking slightly. He was tired and scared and far from home. But he was also learning. "If we survive this," Ven said, "I will tell the council what I have seen. I will tell them that the humans know what they are doing." "If we survive," Day agreed. Hyan's voice came from across the position. 10 minutes until support arrives." 10 more minutes. The Kryn were still attacking. The Marines were running low on ammunition, but they were still alive. They were still fighting, and for the first time, the Valkyrie were fighting with them, not just beside them. Yuna looked at her soldiers. 10 minutes. We can do this. Stay focused. Stay alive. We are Marines. This is what we do. The Marines responded with nods and grim smiles. They knew she was right. They had been trained for this. They had been prepared for this. Their old tactics had kept them alive this long. Those same tactics would keep them alive for 10 more minutes. They just had to hold. The planet was called Vorn 4. It was a cold world covered in gray rocks and thin trees that grew sideways because of the constant wind. The sky was always dark, filled with thick clouds that never went away. It was not a nice place, but it was where the Kryn had chosen to build their forward base. So, was where the Alliance had to fight. Lieutenant Yuna led her squad through a narrow valley between two tall cliffs. She moved carefully, checking every shadow, every rock, every place where an enemy could hide. Behind her came 12 Marines and 6 Velthari soldiers. The Velthari moved differently than the humans. They walked tall and proud, their golden armor shining even in the dim light. They did not check the shadows. They trusted their armor and their weapons to protect them. Yuna did not trust armor. She trusted training. Sergeant Day was at the back of the group, watching behind them. Private Hyam was in the middle, carrying the squad's heavy radio. 2 other Marines, Sumin and Jay, walked on either side of him. They were young but well-trained. The Velthari leader was called Captain Ven. He was tall even for a Velthari, with pale blue skin and eyes that were almost white. He had made it clear from the start that he did not respect the humans. He thought they were slow and weak. He thought their weapons were ugly and their tactics were foolish. But Commander Teho had ordered Yuna to work with the Velthari, so she did. "We are wasting time," Ven said. His voice was sharp and impatient. "We should move faster. The Kryn base is still 5 kilometers away." Yuna did not look at him. She kept watching the cliffs. "Speed does not matter if we walk into an ambush." "There is no ambush," Ven said. "Our sensors show no enemy activity in this area." "Sensors can be fooled," Yuna said. Ven made a sound of disgust. "This is why humans are slow. You are afraid of shadows." Yuna stopped walking. She held up her fist, the signal for everyone to stop. The Marines stopped immediately. The Velthari stopped a few seconds later, confused. "What is it?" Ven demanded. Yuna pointed to the ground ahead of them. There was a small patch of disturbed rocks. It looked like someone had tried to hide something and then covered it up. But the rocks were not the same color as the rocks around them. "That is nothing," Ven said. "Just natural movement of the ground." Yuna picked up a rock and threw it at the patch. The moment the rock hit, there was a bright flash and a loud explosion. The ground where the rock had landed was now a smoking hole. The Velthari soldiers stepped back in surprise. Ven said nothing. "That was a pressure mine," Yuna said. "If we had walked over it, 3 or 4 of us would be dead." Before Ven could respond, the cliffs around them came alive with movement. Dark shapes appeared on the rocks above them. The shapes had long arms, wide heads, and bodies covered in black scales. Their eyes glowed red in the dim light. The Kryn. There were at least 50 of them, and they were already firing. The Kryn weapons shot beams of bright green energy. The beams cut through the air with a terrible sound. One of the Velthari soldiers was hit in the chest. His golden armor melted like butter, and he fell without making a sound. "Cover!" Yuna shouted. "Get to cover now." The Marines moved without thinking. They had trained for this 1,000 times. They ran to the nearest rocks and threw themselves behind them. They pressed their bodies flat and made themselves as small as possible. The Velthari did not know what to do. They stood in the open, firing their weapons at the cliffs. They were brave, but bravery was not the same as tactics. 2 more of them fell in the first 10 seconds. "Get down!" They shouted at them. "Get behind something." Captain Ven finally understood. He pulled his remaining soldiers behind a large rock. His white eyes were wide with shock. He had never been in a fight like this before. Yuna pressed her back against a rock and looked at the cliffs. The Kryn had the high ground. They had cover. They had numbers. This was a perfect ambush. "Hyen," she called. "Call for support. Tell command we are under heavy attack." Grid 774. "Yes, Lieutenant," Hyen said. He was scared, but he did his job. He pressed the buttons on his radio and started talking. The green beams kept coming. They hit the rocks around the Marines, sending up showers of sparks and pieces of stone. The noise was terrible. The air smelled like burning metal. Sue-Min, a young woman with short black hair, crawled over to Yuna. "Lieutenant, what do we do? We are trapped." Yuna looked at the cliffs again. She counted the enemy positions. She measured the angles. She thought about the old lessons she had learned, the lessons that had been passed down for 100 years. "We hold," she said. "We hold until help arrives. And we make them pay for every second." She raised her rifle and fired 3 shots at a Kryn that was leaning out from behind a rock. The first shot missed. The second shot hit the rock. The third shot hit the Kryn in the head. It fell from the cliff and landed on the ground below with a heavy sound. "Good shot," they said. He was firing too, slow and careful. Each shot was aimed. Each shot was meant to kill. The Valkyrie were firing as well, but they were firing too fast. They were wasting energy. Their weapons made bright lights and loud sounds, but they were not hitting much. Then, Yuna called, "Tell your soldiers to slow down. Aim before they shoot." "Do not tell me how to fight," Ven shouted back. His voice was angry, but there was fear in it too. "I am trying to keep you alive," Yuna said. More Kryn were appearing on the cliffs. 60 now, maybe 70. They were moving closer, jumping from rock to rock. They were fast and they were not afraid. Private J, a thin man with a calm face, was watching the left side of the valley. "Lieutenant, they're trying to flank us. 20 of them moving along the left cliff." Yuna nodded. She had seen it too. The Kryn were smart. They were trying to get behind the Alliance soldiers. "They, take J and Sumin. Cover the left. Do not let them get around us." "Yes, Lieutenant." They moved without hesitation. Jay and Sumin followed him. They found new cover and started firing at the Kryn on the left. Hyen looked up from his radio. "Lieutenant, command says help is on the way. 20 minutes. 20 minutes. That was a long time when you were in a fight. A lot of people could die in 20 minutes. Yuna looked at her Marines. They were scared, but they were doing their jobs. They were using their cover. They were aiming their shots. They were working together, just like they had been trained. Then she looked at the Valkyrie. 3 of them were dead. The other 3 were huddled behind a rock, firing wildly. They did not know what to do. "Van," she said, "move your soldiers to that rock on the right. You can cover our right side from there." "We should retreat," Van said. "We cannot win this fight." "There is nowhere to retreat to," Yuna said. "The valley is a trap. The only way out is forward or up. And right now, the Kryn control both." Ven looked at her. His white eyes were full of fear and anger. "Your old tactics have failed us." Yuna shook her head. "My old tactics are the only reason we are still alive. Now move to that rock and cover our right side." That is an order. For a moment, she thought Ven would refuse. But then he nodded and started moving. His soldiers followed him. Yuna turned back to the cliffs. The Kryn were still coming. But the Marines were holding. They were buying time with blood and bullets. 20 minutes. She just had to keep everyone alive for 20 more minutes. She raised her rifle and fired again. The Great Hall of the Galactic Council was built to make everyone feel small. The ceiling stretched so high that clouds could form inside it. The walls were made of white stone that glowed with soft light. Thousands of seats rose in circles around the central platform, and almost every seat was filled with aliens from across the galaxy. Commander Tai-Ho stood on the central platform. He was a tall man with gray hair and a face that showed many years of hard living. His uniform was simple and dark green, the standard dress of the Earth Marine Corps. Behind him stood 3 other humans. Lieutenant Yuna was young, maybe 30 years old, with sharp eyes that watched everything. Sergeant Day was older, thick and strong like a tree trunk. Private Hyan was the youngest, nervous and trying not to show it. They were the only humans in a room full of creatures that looked nothing like them. The Valkyrie sat in the highest seats. They were tall beings with blue skin and 4 arms. They wore golden armor and looked down at the humans with cold eyes. The Valkyrie Empire was the oldest and strongest member of the Galactic Alliance. They had been fighting wars in space for 10,000 years. To them, humans were children who had just learned to walk. General Morik of Valkyrie stood and pointed one of his 4 hands at Tai-Ho. His voice was deep and filled the entire hall without any need for machines to make it louder. "We have reviewed your military records," Morik said. "We have studied your tactics and your weapons, and we must say that we are not impressed." Tai-Ho did not move. His face showed nothing. "You humans have been traveling in space for only 200 years, Morik continued. "In that time, you have fought many wars, but you have fought them the same way every time. You use the same formations, the same strategies, the same methods that your ancestors used on your home planet centuries ago." There were sounds of agreement from other aliens in the hall. The Korathi, who looked like giant insects, clicked their mandibles. The Fen, who were covered in thick fur, growled softly. "The Kryn are coming," Morik said. "They have destroyed 12 civilizations already. They do not fight like anyone we have seen before. And you expect to face them with tactics that are 100 years old?" Lieutenant Yuna stepped forward, but Tai-Ho raised his hand slightly. She stopped. "May I speak?" Tai-Ho asked. His voice was calm. Morik waved one of his hands. "Speak, human." Tai-Ho looked around the hall. He took his time. He looked at the Valkyrie in their golden armor. He looked at the Korathi with their sharp claws. He looked at the Fen with their thick muscles. Then he looked back at Morik. "You are right," Tai-Ho said. "Our tactics are old. Some of them are very old. We still teach our soldiers to dig trenches. We still teach them to hold their fire until the enemy is close. We still teach them to move in small groups and cover each other." Morik smiled. It was not a friendly smile. "So you admit that you are outdated?" "No," Tai-Ho said. "I admit that our tactics are old. But old does not mean the same thing as outdated." The hall became quiet. Many aliens leaned forward in their seats. Tai-Ho continued. "You asked why we use the same methods our ancestors used. The answer is simple. Those methods work. They have been tested in thousands of battles. They have been tested against every kind of enemy. They have been tested in every kind of weather and every kind of ground. And after all that testing, they still work." "Your wars were fought on one planet," said a Korathi general, "against other humans. The Kryn are not human." "No," Tai-Ho agreed. "They are not. But bullets still kill them. Explosions still hurt them. And soldiers who know how to work together can still defeat them." Morik laughed. It was a loud and mocking sound. "You think your old tactics can defeat an enemy that has destroyed entire worlds?" Tai-Ho looked at him. "I think that any enemy can be defeated if you understand the basics of war. And the basics do not change. Cover, movement, fire, support. These things are true whether you are fighting in a jungle or on a moon or in a space station." "Pretty words," Morik said. "But words do not win wars." "No," Tai-Ho said. "They do not. Actions win wars. And I am offering you our actions. Earth is sending 10,000 Marines to join the Alliance fleet. 10,000 soldiers who have trained their whole lives to fight and win. Morag looked at the other Velthari generals. They whispered to each other in their own language. Then Morag turned back to Tejo. We will accept your soldiers, Morag said, but only if they follow our commands. They will use our tactics, our weapons, our methods. Your old ways have no place in this war. Sergeant Day made a small sound of anger. Tejo did not react. We will follow the chain of command, Tejo said carefully. But my soldiers will fight the way they have been trained to fight. I will not send them into battle unprepared. Morag's eyes narrowed. You dare to challenge the wisdom of the Velthari Empire. I dare to protect my people, Tejo said. That is my job. That is why I am here. The hall was silent for a long moment. Then Morag nodded slowly. Very well, he said. We will see how your old tactics perform against the Kryn. When they fail, do not say that we did not warn you. Tejo bowed his head slightly. And when they succeed, I hope you will remember this conversation. He turned and walked off the platform. Day and Hyan followed him. The aliens watched them go, some with curiosity, some with anger, and some with something that might have been respect. When they were out of the hall and walking down a long white corridor, Yuna spoke. Sir, do you really think we can do this? The Kryn have destroyed 12 civilizations. Tejo kept walking. The Kryn have never fought humans. They do not know what we can do. They smiled a hard smile. And they do not know about the old ways. Tejo nodded. The old ways have kept us alive for a very long time. They will keep us alive a little longer. Private Hyan looked nervous. Sir, what if the Velthari are right? What if we are outdated? Tejo stopped and turned to look at the young man. His eyes were kind but serious. Hyan, listen to me. A tactic that is 100 years old and still being used is not outdated. It is proven. It has survived because it works. New tactics might sound exciting, but they have not been tested. In a war, I will take tested over exciting every time. Hyan nodded slowly. He did not look completely convinced, but he looked less afraid. They continued walking. Somewhere ahead of them, a fleet was gathering. Somewhere in the dark of space, the Kryn were coming. And 10,000 human Marines were about to show the galaxy what old tactics could do.